All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er day 3 of the draft video. And of course, check out Pig and a Pickle. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in Marin County from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. All right, 49ers, they're now, the fifth round is going on right now. They come up in about 10, 15 picks from now. Let's talk a little bit about their day 3 needs, because it's when you take a kicker in the second round, or I should say in the third round of the draft, with your second pick overall. A lot of times people are like, well, do they have any needs? And the 49ers made it seem like, no, we really don't have any major needs. So let's take a look at their depth chart and see really where their needs are. All right, so let's start at the very top with wide receiver. You have most teams keep 5 or 6. They have Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, Danny Gray, Chris Conley, Ray McLeod, Tay Martin, Willie Snead, Daz Newsome, and Tyron Johnson. So they currently have 10 receivers. Do they need a receiver? Well, they may not need a receiver this year. In fact, they may have a hard time even drafting a receiver this year that can make their team. But you don't know about the future of Brandon Ayuk. They're going to pick up his 5th-year option, but then what does it mean for him next year? If you could find a sleeper wide receiver with size and speed, Bryce Ford Wheaton from West Virginia, Matt Landers from Arkansas come to mind, and there are others. But maybe that could be potentially a need. But on the surface, I would say wide receiver is not a need, just from the standpoint anybody they draft this year is going to have a hellacious time of even just making the roster. All right, let's get to tight end. They have George Kittle. They just drafted Cameron Latu, who will slot in as the number two tight end. They also have Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelly. What could they use here? Well, some people like Latu as a blocker. I think Latu's more of a receiving threat. The nice thing is he's kind of a combo. He's probably a little bit of both, so he's a guy that you could use and not necessarily give away if you're going run or pass. To me, there were a lot better players on the board and maybe even some better tight ends on the board, but they went with Latu. Now, is tight end a need? I would say it is. Dwelly and Latu and Warner will probably battle it out for two spots. But the Niners sometimes go with depth at tight end. The one guy that I really like is Elijah Higgins, who's a wide receiver from Stanford, who I'd love to see them bulk up. And he would be a great day 3 pick or potentially an undrafted free agent. All right, let's move to offensive line. All right, right now you got Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel returns at center, Spencer Burford is at right guard, you got Colton McKivitz at right tackle. And then they picked up John Feliciano, who's a veteran, Matt Pryor, who's a veteran. They still have Jason Poe, Nick Zakel. You still have Jalen Moore and Keith Ishmael, as well as Alfredo Gutierrez and Leroy Watson. So that's what makes up the group. It's just a matter of how confident are you in Colton McKivitz. Now, a lot of people feel like Colton McKivitz might be a better pass protector than Mike McGlinchey, but not as good of a run blocker. Either way, I would say offensive line, is definitely could be a need at tackle. They could get one tackle. McClendon Curtis is one of my favorite players. He's probably going to come off the board here any moment now. But to me, a one pick on the offensive line on day 2 or after the draft would probably be in order. I like Colton McKivitz, and I'm okay with Colton McKivitz and Jalen Moore splitting time. Don't forget this. Zakel's had a great offseason. Feliciano's been a starter. Neither of those guys are slated to start. So the Niners could plug one of those guys, if not both, in at right guard and slide Spencer Burford out to tackle. And that might be their plan because they haven't gone tackle in their first 3 picks. So they might be covered on the offensive line, but if they could find a tough day 3 prospect who potentially could play on the right side of their line, I think they're looking for that. All right, let's get to quarterback. They have Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold. You can only have 3 quarterbacks. So unless they're going to move Trey Lance in some kind of a surprise trade here on day 3, those are their 3 guys, and I would be surprised if they pick up any quarterback in the draft. We've already seen the teams in their division. Stetson Bennett went to the Rams. DTR is off the board. I think, did he go to the Browns? And then you saw Clayton Tune go to the Cardinals. So these teams are looking for their own version of Brock Purdy in the division. But the Niners have Purdy, Lance, and Darnold. And if they're going to take somebody, it might be the Utah State kid Bonner after the draft. I could see him as an undrafted free agent. The other position is running back. The Niners are pretty stacked at running back. Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Ty Davis-Price, and Kyle Juszczyk. That's 5 right there. Now, the one element that they don't have is they don't have that lightning fast Raheem Mostert type back, the guy who can get to the edge at will. Keaton Mitchell is interesting. Deuce Vaughn is interesting if you're looking for kind of an undersized guy who could potentially be a home run hitter on special teams. I could see that being a pick today at running back. There's a number of interesting day 3 running backs, and I would imagine the 49ers are going to draft one. All right, let's jump over to the defensive side. Well, we can hit special teams first. Wishnowski is the punter. Jake Moody is now your new kicker. Tabor Pepper is their long snapper. They like him. They've used Ray McLeod and Brandon Ayuk as punt returners. They're using Ray McLeod and Danny Gray as kick returners. So, I mean, maybe they would draft a return guy to compete with Ray. But overall, I think they're pretty set specialist-wise. As far as special teams. All right, now let's go into where I think the needs really are, and that's on the defensive side of the ball. The 49ers lost 700 snaps when Samson Ebukam, Jordan Willis, and Charles Omenihu all left. They've replaced them with Austin Bryant from Detroit, a free agent, and they also picked up Cleveland Farrell. I don't think Bryant or Farrell are in the category or class of the guys they've lost. There's still some good free agent defensive ends. There's also defensive ends you could trade for in Montez Sweat, Chase Young, I should say. And there's great edge rushers in this draft. This is where the draft is exceptionally deep. I would be totally fine today if the 49ers went defensive line 3 times here on day 3 of the draft. To me, they could still use some edge rushers to go with Nick Bosa and Drake Jackson. To me, you got 2 edge rushers that are starting caliber. Farrell's a backup, Bryant's a backup, Hyder's a backup, Alex Barrett's a practice squad guy. The Niners need a couple of rotational pass rushers for sure today. Linebacker. Now, linebacker, the Niners go oftentimes with a 5-2 or a 4-2-5 look with the nickel. They play a lot of sub package. So Greenlaw and Warner are your every down backers, your stack backers. You also have Warren Burks. You have Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who's a special team stalwart. You have Marcelino McCrary-Ball, who I think is going to step in for Azeez Al-Shaair as that third starting linebacker at times in the base. And you got Curtis Robinson, who's a phenomenal special teamer as well. To me, this is a spot where I would just try. There's 2 or 3 guys that I really like. Krishan Merriweather from Texas Tech, Charlie Thomas from Georgia Tech, Carlton Marshall from Troy State. All 3 of those guys are just tackling machines, and I'd love to see one of those guys here. My favorite is Charlie Thomas. But linebacker, not necessarily a huge need. They could go with a linebacker after the draft. I do expect them to pick up somebody late on day 3 or possibly after the draft as an undrafted free agent. But that's a position they've had a great run on. They found Azeez as an undrafted guy. They found Marcelino as an undrafted guy. I've got confidence in the Niners scouts that they'll be able to find an undrafted guy. But Charlie Thomas from Georgia Tech would be absolutely my favorite. All right, let's get to the safety position. They bring in Ji'Ayir Brown. Ji'Ayir Brown's a starter. Now, I don't know if he's going to start this year. I think he'll probably beat out Tayshaun Gibson. I think he's a much better player than Tayshaun Gibson, who's a great ball hawk, but not a real physical player at this point. To me, Ji'Ayir Brown starts next to Hufanga probably at some point. Gibson probably starts to begin the year. And, you've also got George Odom, who's one of the league's better special teamers. And you got Taylor Hawkins, the San Diego State kid, who's a corner converting to safety. This is year 2 in the Niners system. So I would say, possibly a guy like Hill. I think it's Brandon Hill from Pittsburgh, who could be a late 7th round pick or an undrafted guy, could be a great physical safety to help out on special teams, but it's not a tremendous need. So now let's look at cornerback. Cornerback, I do think, is a need. You've got Diamador Lenore, you've got Charvarius Ward, but you lost Jimmy Ward and you lost Emmanuel Mosley. Now they did sign Miles Hartsfield. They did bring in Isaiah Oliver to be nickelbacks. So they might be a little bit covered there. But Hartsfield and Oliver, Charvarius and Womack, Lenore, that gives you 5 dependable guys. And you want to have at least 5. If you can have 7 or 8, that's the more ideal. The Niners looked at a lot of day 3 corners, and I would expect at least 1 or 2 of their additions today to be day 3 corners. They still have Ambry Thomas. They still have Quantrez Knight, who might be a safety, he might be a corner. In my mind, he might be better as a safety. So overall, let's look at this roster and say, where are their day 3 needs? To me, their day 3 needs are really clear. It's cornerback, it's defensive end, it's speed running back, it's offensive tackle, and maybe just best player available regardless of position. Those would be the 5 needs, and they have roughly 5 picks today, and they've done a really good job on day 3 and a really great job after the draft. So just a look at day 3 going into day 3, or I should say in the middle of day 3. We're in the 5th round right now. Niners pick will come up in a little bit, but that's how I see their day 3 needs. And, to me, it should be a very, very interesting day 3 and a very interesting group of undrafted free agents. This is where the Niners' sweet spot has been. They're really good on day 3. They're really good after the draft. They're going to need to be because Seattle has bolstered their team. Philly's bolstered their team. I think the division has gotten better, clearly. The 49ers don't have a lot of huge needs, but right off the top, it's probably 1 more offensive tackle, 2 edge rushers, maybe 2 more corners, and just whoever the best player that happens to fall. It doesn't look like any quarterbacks will be coming their way unless they really love Max Duggan. Duggan's one of the lone quarterback prospects still on the board. All right, hope you enjoyed the 49er video. Check out Pig in a Pickle. They're in Corte Madera and Emeryville. And thanks for checking out and supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.